do have confidence in Mark Rowley, but that confidence has to be earned. I mean, it would be remiss of me to suggest he's doing nothing when he's clearly trying to set out plans. But that plans are only as good as the actions and outcomes that come from them. So I don't think that it's not a blank check, but I think he deserves to be given a chance.
The number of rape survivors who decide to drop their case has more than doubled since 2015. That figure comes from new Labour Party analysis. Jess Phillips joins us now on Times Radio. She's Labour's Shadow Domestic Violence and Safeguarding Minister. Good morning to you. Hi there, Jess, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, got you now. Lovely.
Sorry.
Why is this happening then? The people dropping their cases more than doubling since 2015. Do we know the reasons for that?
I mean, there will be a number of reasons. People feel unsupported in the system. The system takes so very long. I mean, the sort of average wait for a rape case to come to trial at the moment, thanks to years of court closures and breakdown in the justice system, is 3 years. And actually, I handle cases. I'm handling a case at the moment where somebody's waited since 2017 to see the inside of a courtroom, and I have to meet with her every single week. I mean, literally in my office every single week in order to try and hold her in the system. And there just isn't that level of support for the vast majority of these cases. So people drop out. They don't have proper legal advice as they're going through the system. It's very traumatic to go through this. And if what you're going to get out the end is some rubbish sentence or nothing at all, is very, very difficult. Also, I think some of the trust in police that has been occurring recently, I've handled a number of different cases where people have dropped out because of stories around, specifically in those cases, the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah, we'll get to the Met Police. It's a very good point, that. You hear the phrase, Jess Phillips, rape is effectively decriminalised in this country. And I wonder whether... Do you agree with it? And actually, is there a danger that the more it's a fine balance, isn't it? Because we want to raise these problems and highlight them so change is affected. But if we say things like that, and you hear that quite often on the media, then it might actually encourage women to drop the cases because they feel there's no point in pursuing them.
Well, look, women aren't stupid, and actually more women are coming forward now than ever before. So I don't know that it actually squares out in the reality. So more victims are coming forward, not fewer. So that's a good thing. But the reality is, yes, of course. I think that rape is basically decriminalised when you have 98.4% of all cases not getting a charge, let alone being seen by on the inside of a courtroom, let alone the inside of a prison. Then of course I have to say it's a very worrying thing. And it isn't just that we're failing victims. This leaves dangerous offenders on our streets. I'm afraid to say the system is absolutely broken and has suffered terribly over the last decade of Conservative government, I'm afraid.
This is not in your jurisdiction, it's actually in Scotland, but we were talking about this quite a lot yesterday. I just want your thoughts on it. We were completely baffled by this case in Scotland of a 17-year-old man being spared jail for the rape of a 13-year-old girl, essentially because he was young. And there's guidance in Scotland that greater leniency should be given to the young because their brains have not been fully formed until the age of 26. What do you make of that?
I mean, I, like everybody else, was absolutely flabbergasted by the sentence that was handed down in that case. And were that to be a case in England, I would be immediately getting in touch with the Attorney General to ask for a review on an unduly lenient sentence. The system is slightly different in Scotland. It's around appeal. But actually, what I think that whilst those guidelines may have been set with rehabilitation in mind, I think when we're talking about sexual offences, I don't know what the evidence is that this is appropriate in the case of sexual offences. And Ian Murray, my colleague up in Scotland, has today written an article urging people in Scotland to get involved in the consultation to ensure that this sort of thing can't happen again. Obviously, individual cases are for the judges to follow sentence guidelines, which seems to have been the case in this wrong. But then I might suggest that sentence guidelines are wrong. But actually, there was a story today as well that 4,000 adults who had been found to have sexually assaulted children in England were given community sentences or suspended sentences in the last 10 years since the Tories came to power. So this isn't just a case of this one particular case. It is a broken system that hasn't had the priority that it needs. The Labour Party is calling for fast-track rape courts. It's calling for legal support for victims from the moment that they report, and has repeatedly and tried to get the government to back, although they voted against it, specialist rape units in every single police force in the country. This needs to be a priority.
Let's talk about the police force, because you mentioned the problem of trust in the police. The news today is from Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Met Police. He's aiming to root out rogues in the force. He's announcing the biggest purge of dodgy officers since the 1970s. He's actually taking officers from investigating criminals to investigating themselves, which may or may not be a good use of resources. I'm a bit struck by this, Jess Phillips, that Rowley, this Met insider, was there for 10 years. He's involved in some of the parts of the Met that were actually the worst parts of the Met in the Casey report. He's sort of being accepted as a new broom by the political establishment. Everyone doesn't want a bigger problem, so they say, oh, Mark Rowley will solve this problem. Do you have confidence in him and in his steps today?
Yeah, look, I do have confidence in Mark Rowley, but that confidence has to be earned. I mean, it would be remiss of me to suggest he's doing nothing when he's clearly trying to set out plans. But that plans are only as good as the actions and outcomes that come from them. So I don't think that it's not a blank check, but I think he deserves to be given a chance. However, I mean, what I would say on this is that I don't think it's just Mark Rowley who has a problem. I think this is a problem across police forces all across the country. And I think that the Home Secretary has a responsibility to ensure that vetting standards, that policing standards, that things that the law is changed so that when cases of sexual violence and domestic abuse come in about officers, that they are suspended from their duties. Like, there is no standardized system at the moment. And I think the Home Secretary is the one who, frankly, we need a new broom there.
I understand that you might say that, Jess. So it's just finally before you go. Government looking to change the law to give primacy on biological sex over assigned gender, so women-only safe spaces can be guaranteed. I wonder if you support that, and also if you feel that your own party is moving towards a sort of consensus on this, where it was a bit wishy-washy, it was a bit struggling to define a woman, but now it seems to recognise, I don't know if you agree with this, that there are some things for where biological sex matters, where women-only safe spaces are important, and the government is pushing to do that, and actually Labour is pushing in the same direction now.
Yeah, look, I think that the Labour Party has committed to safe spaces for women since the very beginning, and said that its policy is that of the Equalities Act, which currently does define sex, not gender. That is already the case. But look, if that needs clarity, and I think that we've seen over the past couple of years that potentially that is the case. In fact, no, not potentially, it is the case that there might need to be some clarity on the difference between sex and gender. Then I will wholeheartedly, with a complete sort of dispassionate view, look at what is being proposed in a change to the Equalities Act. It was, of course, the Labour Party who put the Equalities Act in place, but it needs to protect. Definitely already say sex in it. That's literally what it says.
But it does need to protect, you would say, biological women in certain spaces. And if it's not 100%. doing that, it should do that.
Of course, I mean, I dedicated my entire life to running specialist women's only services. So, of course, I think that women's biological sex is something that should be protected without question. In fact, in lots of cases, I think that the government don't go far enough. For example, I want to see contracts around things like refuge being made out so that they have to be specialist single sex spaces, whereas actually we see that going by the wayside in commercial contracting all the time, and the government don't seem to care about it in those regards, but they do care about it when it makes headlines.
But you do want them to go a bit further. Jess Phillips, thank you for joining us this morning. She is Labour's Shadow Domestic Violence and Safeguarding Minister.
And if you like that,
you can listen to us.
We're sticking asthma. Have you forgotten?
Well done. Every Monday to Thursday on Times Radio Breakfast.